can someone get into design and make money?
One thing that I was told early on is there are times in your career where you're paid to learn, and then there are other times where you're paid because you can perform. And some students can come out of school and be ready to perform day one, but I would say the majority of people are actually being paid to learn the job that they then down the road will be paid because they know how to perform at it. And that's an important thing to.
All right. Hey, I'm super stoked. We got Fred Hart on the podcast today. We're talking to Fred. I've spoken to Fred a couple times in the past. You've built a killer agency and now you've kind of moved on and you're doing some amazing stuff as well. So Fred, man, how's it going?
It's great. Mom, if you're listening, I love you. Just got to get that out of the way.
Perfect. All right, man. So I got a bunch of questions. We got a short time because you got a hard stop. So who are you, Fred? What have you done?
Well, I'm someone that's still learning, which I'm really excited about. What have I done? Done a lot of things, but I got a lot more to do. Most recently, nice. I built a branding and design agency in the CPG space called Interact Brands. Did that for the last 9 years. And as of May 31st, 2024, left that business and am on a new adventure right now. And I'm still figuring that out.
All right. So you built a 30-person agency, Interact, and then you said you just left it as of a couple of weeks, basically.
Yep.
What's that mean that you've left? Like, how does that work?
It's a great question. I had to figure that out, and it took me a long time. I had a business partner, Blake Mitchell, great guy, very active in the space. He and I got together 9 years ago. I moved from San Francisco to Boulder to join him in the firm that he had acquired from his father. And we were a 3-person agency at that time with big ambitions. We were primarily just like a packaging design agency, doing mostly turnkey stuff, not a lot of strategy, not a lot of concept. And we both really wanted to rally around this notion of how do we turn ourselves into the next agency that's really pushing brands forward and building the next generation of consumer-led brands. So I, was fortunate to see a lot of changes throughout our 9 years. But as oftentimes can happen, people have different visions and what they want for themselves and their careers changes. And Blake and I decided that it was best to sort of part ways. So I was bought out of the business at the end of December 2023. Stayed on for 5 months to help with the transition of the agency and provide as much stability as I could with new people coming in and just documenting as much as we could of the historical knowledge so that they're in the best position to continue to succeed while I figure out a new plan and chart some new success.
All right. So you built this thing from 2-3 people.
Yes.
To 30 in 9 years, which is that's pretty quick, man.
Yeah. There were definitely moments, COVID was in there somewhere. That was an interesting start and stop. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is just the amount of wonderful people that we were able to surround ourselves with over time. In the early days, we're just kind of bootstrapping things. And I think having a lot of interns and grooming them to become junior designers and then middleweight and then seniors. But as the business gained more success, we were suddenly able to hire talent. And from all over the place. We were always Boulder-based pre-COVID. And then after COVID, we became a remote workforce. So we had 5 people in New York, 5 in Austin, a handful still in Colorado, and then East Coast and Boston and everywhere else. And that just was a real blessing for us in terms of the amount of talent we could bring to the table.
When you're starting out at 3 people, how do you know like you're ready to grow? Like what's that one thing you were like, all right, I can't take the workload or we're making enough. We can hire someone. Like what's that one key thing like, all right, now it's time to step it up?
I'd say a 90-hour work week is pretty good signal that you need to hire someone else and bring a little more bandwidth in.
That's average. That's hustle culture, man.
That is, everyone, as long as you're doing ice baths, you can handle 90.
Right. You got a journal.
I think with each successful project we had, the inbounds started to grow. And so if we're seeing more inbounds and we're starting to close a few more projects, it's always sort of reactive, I think, in the early stages. You're not making these investments ahead of time. You're sort of reacting to the fact that you've got more work than you need. And we would bring on a lot of freelancers and then realize, we've got so many freelancers, we can convert some of those people to full-time to grow the culture, to grow the knowledge base, and to create more continuity in the projects.
when you're looking at someone that you're bringing on as like freelance, or then you transition them to full-time.
Yep.
Question I always get asked is like, all right, how much can I expect to make as a designer, as a creative? We were talking before we started recording. It's like, I spoke to someone and they're like, well, I think I should be making, 125, 150, because that's what my school loans are. Like there's no like real number that people have in mind. They just, it's like, this is what I need. That's what I'm gonna ask for. But like, really, like what's like, I guess, can someone get into design and make money, like for the most part?
I only know my story and what we did early on at Interact. So I left school in 2011, got my first design job in the Bay Area. So you got cost of living. They were a 10-person agency. They were pretty successful. And I made $60,000 my first year. And I actually thought that was pretty good. I was surprised that I was going to be making that. I had low expectations. I thought I'd be in maybe like the 40,000 range coming out of school at that time. So that's what I made when I started. But I also know that when we were building Interact in the early days and we were hiring interns or converting interns into junior designers, we were probably in the 40 range. Now, it was just because of the business dynamics that we had. We were not successful. We were not 10 people. We didn't have a sound business underneath us yet. And there was also the opportunity element. I think one thing that I was told early on is there are times in your career where you're paid to learn. Mm-hmm. And then there are other times where you're paid because you can perform. And, some students can come out of school and be ready to perform day one. But I would say the majority of people are actually being paid to learn the job that they then down the road will be paid because they know how to perform at it. And that's an important thing to not lose sight of.
That was like the most well put way. It is like you're coming out of school, you have all these ideas that you've done. There's no parameters, there's no budgets. You can create amazing things, but when it comes to like the real world, you're getting feedback from people that have no design experience. You're getting feedback from people that are like showing it to their kids. And, it's like, how do you react to that? And there's so much learning that happens to then, help you continue building your career and be able to react to these things and how to present your work. And even just like, how do you think? All right, let's take a quick second to talk about idpdirect.com. Go right to that website, download the design guides, the sustainability guides, the recyclable icon guide, which basically lists out all the different icons. It gives them to you in vectors. You can drop them right into your artwork right now, today, and go right into production. All right, back to the pod. What you're getting paid to do.
Right. And I think early on, we would always hire for character because we knew no matter what someone told us or tried to convince us of in their portfolio, that their skill sets were, you always saw those like those spectrums of like, oh, my Adobe skills, like, and it's on the far right hand side. You're like, probably not. What it might be there, but the reality is you hire for character because everyone's going to learn skills on the job. If you have the right mindset, you can eventually go on to make really good money. But I wouldn't say that design is an industry that you go into because you want to make money. I think you go into it because you are passionate about this thing. And it's something that you want to be invested in. And if you're great at it, you will be paid.
And would you recommend somebody go in? So if somebody's looking to make money, that they build an agency or they work independently?
There are a lot of great global agencies that pay their people very well. We talk about, in the branding space, you got the JKRs, the Pearl Fishers, the Turner Duckworths. And we've talked with a lot of those creative directors as we slowly started to bring people into Interact over the years. And I saw people making $200,000, $300,000 a year.
I'm going to be rich.
At a creative director level or at a design strategist level, you can be an account director and make pretty good money, 6 figures. So I don't ultimately think you have to own an agency to make great money. There's obviously more upside, but there's also a lot of other things that come with it that most people don't realize, like the pressure to constantly bring things in, to account for other people, all of the expenses that come with owning an agency, et cetera. But it is certainly a great way to build upside, but it doesn't have to be through ownership.
You talk about like bringing stuff in. So as a creative director, you're also there to sell.
Yeah.
Right? You got to bring the work in.
Ideally.
And most people go into design because they're not salespeople, right? It's like, and that's part of the training, right? As you're learning the job. part of it's selling. So like, how do you land a big client? Like what's the craziest thing you've seen done to land a client, to bring one in?
I've heard interesting stories and things I've always wanted to try. One of my favorite things I read in a Fast Company article once was in a new business pitch, someone showed a client a brand and said, this is like one of the newest competitors that just launched in your space, blah, 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 waxed poetic about it, showed a bunch of work, then went on to talk about their problem and everything. And at the end of the meeting, they actually said, that brand we showed you earlier doesn't exist. That could be yours. Like we created. And so they did this real interesting kind of like Trojan Horse sell-in process that I thought was pretty cool and bold. But I think when it comes to creatives and those that have aspirations for creative director, which I'll get on a side subject and then come back to this, I always feel that there's this misconception in our industry that the only way to progress in your career and make more money is to climb the ladder and to ascend to that director role. But we had plenty of designers at Interact that really had no interest to be client facing, to try to win new business, and just wanted to be craftspeople. And I always told them like, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. We will figure out how to make you whole financially and continue to progress in your career and just have you do the thing that you love. Because we need great designers at the end of the day, and it's not for everyone. And I think that was good for some designers to hear, because there's this fallacy, again, that I think permeates in the industry, that you have to go up, up, up. But ultimately, I think the best creative directors are strategic and understand how to speak their clients' languages.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're solving problems. And if you can understand how to speak the language of business, you're going to be much more dangerous at connecting their business issues to the role of design and how it can solve some of those things.
Should design education include learning how to look at P&L?
Yeah, I think it would be very healthy. P&Ls, understanding all of the different facets that go into the success of a company. In CPG, you have branding design, which is a bright, shiny object, but you have manufacturing, you have brokers, you have retail partners, you have regulatory lawyers, you have food scientists and innovation people. All of those things are critical to help a company perform. And the more that you are aware and educated on those things, the more dangerous you can be asking questions about some of those facets. And if you have a good network, be able to put people in touch with others who can help solve some of those problems to strengthen the thing that you're working on.
I love the idea of creatives like getting into the brands and seeing how they operate, and like working with manufacturers and like going on the line and asking questions like, hey, why is this line running faster than that line? If I add 4 more colors, like,
yep.
Getting in there and talking to the people that are actually hands-on on the equipment, that are, on the filling lines, there's so many different steps to get your design into the hands of consumers. And a lot of times in school, that's the part, again, going back to goddamn, that was like such a good line that you did. It's like, you're getting paid to learn. Part of that learning is you're not just creating like this design, like your design is going to impact all of these people, all of these users, and they're not even the consumer. Like there's a million users before they get to the consumer, which is like the user experience that you're designing for. You've got to design for all of them.
1,000%. I remember when we 2 years ago did the rebrand for Hot Pockets for Nestle, $1 billion brand. They're not, you talk about manufacturing, it's just on a totally different scale. And they have the sleeve on the inside of the box that you put the Hot Pocket into, that is the crisping sleeve when you put it into the microwave. We had redesigned that crisping sleeve to be really cool for the like teen eater, very graphic, not just like bland, boring, utilitarian and instructional. Yeah. And it was a 1-color print job. It was just red with the base substrate of white. But what we didn't realize is the amount of red we were using was going to cost Nestle $1 million in production because of the amount of ink that it was then incurring for them. And we're like, oh, wow. So then we had to do this thing where we had to figure out how much ink are they currently using and what was the threshold. And then how did that retroactively inform what we could do in design? And it's just things like that I think are the fun parts of the job, because they're extra layers of creative problem solving that get us outside of the norm of like, oh, well, does this thing look cool? And is it interesting? And
well, that's just it, right? It's like, if you don't get in and see like the production stuff, if it's just the way that you imagine a design career going, right? When you're in school, you're like, oh, well, we're changing this to red. Let's go. It looks amazing. And then then you check out and you go do whatever. Meanwhile, the brand is stuck with like, now they've got to make a decision. It's going to cost $1 million. So internally, when these are things that can happen, like you hand off a design. Everybody's concerned about sustainability today. What if I told you you can take your pouches, labels, your single serve wrappers and make them completely dissolve, make them completely disappear in water? That's what the team at SmartSolve has done. They've got a paper that is certified flushable. You can actually take the packaging, put it in the sink, put it in the shower, put it in the toilet, flush it. It dissolves completely into fibers. Learn more about SmartSolve. Go to smartsolve.com and ask for samples. Now, let's get back to the show. If you're a freelancer and you don't know kind of the whole process, you can hand off design and walk away. And now the brand is stuck with a decision to make on, do we spend $1 million? Do we not? Let's hand it over to our internal team, which they can have a great internal team, but now they're going to take your design.
Yep.
And, back it into whatever needs to work. So they're going to change that visual.
Yep.
Then when it hits the market, you're like, what happened to my design?
That's because you didn't have a seat at the table to help solve some of those bigger problems. And I think with sustainability being the very important topic that it is now, it's even more critical for creatives and designers to understand all of the other influences and components that go into that. At Interact, we were very lucky because we had Valerie Hawks, who was our head of production and sustainability, and understood the manufacturing side as well as the implications of like, how do you make something more sustainable and what does it mean to actually get it into market? And what are the pros and cons of plastic versus glass, and not just the materials, but the weight and the shipping costs and everything else that goes into those things. And those are critical conversations that really have to be understood if you're going to be advising clients on what to do.
Talking about sustainability, how can someone integrate that into their brand strategy without it coming off as we're just riding the trend, right? We're just riding the trend wave.
I love this subject. It's a good one. I have a personal belief that for 99% of companies, they need what I call Trojan Horse positioning, which is to say they've got to figure out what do consumers actually care about the most selfishly, and then what is the role of sustainability that can be ushered in by focusing on what they care about or what their priorities are, and then following up. So like when you think about Tesla didn't sell themselves as like the world's most sustainable car when they first came out. It was about performance. It was about style. It was about aesthetic. They knew that people that drive cars, one, have an identity wrapped up in it and what that thing looks like. And also two, want to be able to enjoy it, which is why you have the insanity mode and all of the games and things that they can do on the screens and stuff like that. But of course, like if they can sell you on that, the thing that you care about the most, then they can do a lot more good with their sustainability mission by all the other things they're doing on the back end. And so very few companies, I think, that lead with sustainability ultimately have the mass appeal and adoption that they're looking for. I mean, you look at Allbirds. They are one of these companies that I think do a really great job talking about it, but it's still at the end of the day, it's about the silhouette of the shoe, and all of their marketing is about comfort. Now, it comes from natural materials, which then leads them to the sustainability elements, but it starts with comfort and style. And so I think, again, this sort of Trojan horse methodology is really critical because it's putting things in the consumer lens first, their needs, and then what the brand ultimately wants to accomplish.
What's a project, a brand that you guys worked with, or is it Allbirds?
I wish it was Allbirds.
You guys did, that you can look back on and go, yeah, this is how we did it. This worked out really well.
Yeah, I mean, very transparently, it was always something we were figuring out how to do more of sustainability in our work. And it was always tough because clients would come to us and in a lot of ways either weren't ready to have that conversation or were willing to make the financial investments in order to live up to some of those goals and initiatives. So there's all sorts of like small little things, but I think the biggest success we had was we were crafting a sports hydration beverage for Gen Z from the ground up. And it's called Local Weather. You can go find it at Whole Foods. But as we were building it, we first identified who's our target audience. We knew we wanted to build it for the next generation of consumers. We knew we wanted to be different from the Gatorades, Powerades, and Body Armors of the world. And when we focused on what did our audience care about, sustainability and the health of the world is a big thing. So we convinced the brand that they should launch in an aluminum bottle with a screw top, which ended up making them the world's first fully recyclable sports hydration beverage, which was really cool. And so that was an important conversation that we brought it back to, like, this is the audience, this is what they care about, this is why you need to make these investments. And it's been a point of difference for them, both visually on shelf, as well as with their with the people they're trying to market to.
If finding your spec data is a wild goose chase around your office, you've got a data problem. SpecRate is the only cloud-based management specification solution that every brand needs. Because if you don't spec right, you'll spec wrong. With your years of experience, and I'm sure just a ton of research under your belt here with like sustainability, what's important to the consumer? Like, what do consumers actually care about, right? Like, do they care that this bag can be recycled, or this can be recycled? Like, what, selfishly, what do they really care about?
Well, if we're talking food and beverage, they care about taste. Taste is always king.
Yeah.
It's the thing they care about most. Then you have things like function, and it depends on your category a little bit. But protein, it's one of these like macro things that all consumers want. Or maybe it's like no added sugar or less sugar. I mean, if you think about like Poppy and Olipop, which is totally disrupting the carbonated soft drink, aka soda space right now, they're selling flavor, nostalgic flavors, and lower sugar. And then you've got the pre and probiotic thing, which is the sort of like rationale, post-rationalization a consumer will use for that kind of stuff. Because there's system one thinking and then system two. System one is just like, what do I want? What is my lizard brain telling me? I want flavor. I want something delicious. I want something like soda. And then my system two brain, much more rational, slower, is like, yeah, but I know I shouldn't be having soda. So what is that element of permissible indulgence that a brand is bringing to the table? Lower sugar, probiotics in this instance, et cetera. But it's taste, it's benefit, and function to a certain degree. You can't get too crazy with it. And then it's a whole host of other things. But, you know, I've worked with a handful of brands that are regenerative organic, or are doing carbon sequestration through their grass-fed product. But consumers want to hear that message after the reason why they're eating something in the first place has been satisfied.
I want to eat it, enjoy it.
Yep, exactly.
And then I want the rationale that...
And then I want to feel better about it.
Allows me to eat it again and not feel bad.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And, you know, we're messed up as a food society. There's a lot that we can talk about, but like, if you're coming from a place where all of the conventional products you've been told, or you've educated yourself to understand like that they lack nutritional density, there's just nothing good about it, then the alternative doesn't need to be crazy big, but a step in the right direction. And over time, brand after brand, then continuing to improve upon that until there's some sort of like cultural zeitgeist that pushes everyone there. Like plant-based milks is a good example.
That's good. I was at my grocery store like last week, and I was like, I'm just minding my business, just shopping. Yeah, just doing my shopping, and this lady like hustles over to this stack of Poppy that they had, they had like an end cap of it.
Yep.
And she's like, she's telling her husband, from like 2 aisles away, and she's like, oh my God, they've got it on sale. We've got to like stock up on this. And I've never had a can of this stuff. And I turned to her and I'm like, why are you like, what's the big deal? And she's like, it's good for my gut. It's got all these probiotics. It's super healthy. I'm like, but does it taste good? And she's like, it's not the best, but it makes me feel good about my stomach. And I'm like, all right. And I just kept going. I'm like, wow, it's like, I'm not buying something that I enjoy, but there's an excuse in there for allowing me to drink it.
I think you can learn to like things. I mean, look, I like, you put me on an airplane and they come by with the drink cart. I'll have a Coke every now and then. I'm not drinking Diet Coke or Coke Zero. Like, I don't like the taste, but how many people are Diet Coke fans? Tons. So we all have the ability to sort of like alter what we think tastes good, but it has to be close enough. And I think if you've never had a Poppy, I'm going to go buy you a case. And we'll see if you're a believer or not, or if your 11-year-old likes it, or maybe you don't even let them have soda in the first place, which is better altogether.
No, it was just funny because like, yeah, you're right. It's like people just want like an excuse to feel good about the decision.
Yep, exactly. That's all we're looking for.
That's all we care about.
Selfish at the end of the day. We want to indulge, but we know that we shouldn't. And so we look for these like little cheat codes that brands might have built into the product or into the ethos or the mission that make us feel better.
So if you're building a brand strategically, this has to be like up there in like the top 3 things that you need to communicate. Right? If we talk about brand building, if there's a startup that's listening to this and they're like, well, we're doing a pistachio butter or like, whatever product they're launching.
Yep.
How to make you feel good about that decision?
Well, it's going to be the pistachio in that element. There are certain categories though where there's no reason to feel better. It's just about indulgence. I mean, I go to the Sweets and Snacks Confection Show in Chicago, and what I find refreshing about that, because it's just all the biggest candy companies in the world, is none of them have any better for you elements to sell. And so in some ways, it's a pure play of just like brand and marketing. Now, we need to clean up the candy category in a lot of different ways. But something like butter, it's like, well, you're having butter to indulge, not because you want like something that's a little bit better. If you want that, go get margarine, or I can't believe it's not butter, or some of this plant-based stuff. But yeah, I mean, in the overall hierarchy, you have to understand your audience and what they're seeking. And you have to make sure that your product benefit or unique selling proposition or your reason to believe doesn't get in the way. For instance,
have you ever wondered, how do I reduce my carbon footprint? Should I focus on recycled content or reducing weight first? Which design strategies are the most effective for my products? Triac offers multiple solutions for lifecycle assessment, goals management, reporting, EPR fees, and more. Visit triac.com to connect with our team and register for a free 10-day trial of Eco Impact Compass to get started today.
There's a brand out there that sells chips made from chicken. It's called Wilde, W-I-L-D-E. Phenomenal tasting product, and it's 10 grams of protein per serving because it's made from chicken. When they first launched, they thought, there's all these chicken brands, or there's all these chip brands out there. The thing that makes us different is that we're chicken chips. People will like chicken and they'll understand like, oh, it's what makes us better. So they have this big verbal statement, chicken chips, on the front of the pack. It ended up creating a lot of issues for them. People were skeptical. People didn't understand the product. It caused more confusion and actually didn't result in the trial that we're hoping for. If you look at the brand today, it's actually Wild protein chips. So they've reoriented that product positioning to make something that's more approachable to the consumer. And then the consumer sort of figures it out like, oh, wow, the protein source is chicken, but it's not in your face. So it's all case by case, but I think that's the role of being consumer centric in brand building. At the end of the day, most of us are not building brands just for ourselves. We're building them for other people. We may have identified a problem that we saw for ourselves, and there's shared problems with other people, but you have to understand how to position it so that it can be adopted as easily as possible.
Did you guys work on Wild?
We did. Once upon a time, we worked
did you guys
on
do
Wild.
The recent redesign?
No, the recent redesign was done by an agency, Hatch, out of San Francisco.
Okay.
We had done a version before that, and then another agency had done one before us. And I think anytime you're working with really novel or bleeding edge style innovation or products, there's always going to be a steep learning curve of what works and what doesn't. The intel we had at the time was like, we got to own chicken. It was clear though, when Hatch did the latest redesign, that the data was telling them not to own chicken, that they needed to lead with protein instead.
How do you feel when you have like something that you've worked on get redesigned? Like, what does that do to you?
I actually find it a fascinating thing to reverse engineer. Mm-hmm. I don't have an ego wrapped up in like, oh my God, my work, or they ruined it. Now, sometimes a brand may ruin it if aesthetically things are off. But anytime you have a big shift like that, you go, oh, wow, that's interesting. There must be some new insight that's driving that change and that shift for them. Because for every maybe project we have redesigned, we've probably redesigned, 3 other agencies' work along the way. Yeah. And it's all this sort of like brick layering process. A company needed whatever someone else did prior to them to get to that certain spot, to gain those learnings, to then understand what their next move was going to be. And sometimes you need a new partner or a new strategic lens on things. So I'm ultimately a fan. I think there's lots of people that can do good work, and I'm certainly not the only one with the right answer.
So talking about people that can do good work, you've got a ton of experience. You've separated yourself from the agency. Now I want to say you're starting from scratch, but you're not. You're starting with all this experience. Right. So you're on some boards, you've got some investments in some of these products. Like, what do you see the future of design? Because I'm hearing a lot of rumblings of the agency model is going to disappear. Like in the next 10 years, everybody's a freelancer, everybody's a general contractor.
I think there are a lot of agencies right now that are going through a tough time because they have too much overhead and too many full-time employees. And it's tough in our industry where most businesses are project to project based. It's not retainer based. The AOR is really going away in a lot of ways. Things are getting more competitive. And there's more talent than ever in the freelance contractor market. I think where design is going is we've reached this point, and certainly AI is only accelerating this, where the execution of design continues to rise and almost commoditize itself. You can get lots of great design from lots of great people. I think what's going to be the difference in the future now is the strategy of design, and that driving the articulation of the work that gets done. And that's certainly, I'm a bit biased because that's where I've always been. When I was young in my career, I was a good designer, but I wasn't great. And I realized early on, the thing that I was most passionate about was the why behind design. And so that's sort of the path that I've pursued. And it's the number one reason why I think agencies either get something right or wrong is because of the underlying strategic work. And some of that is brand strategy, and then some of it is how do you articulate brand strategy into creative strategy. That sets the table for what designers should be doing in the first place.
If you're a startup, would you recommend they go find an agency or find, somebody that's got a vision to put together a team to then serve them?
Pros and cons to both. I've been on both sides of the table. What I've seen is that every successful brand, particularly in CPG, we can talk about Halo Top or RX Bar or Poppy, what they look like today at the height of their success is very different than what they look like when they started. So like if you look at the original version of Olipop, you'll find some crazy stuff. Poppy used to be called Mother Beverage. It was a vinegar kombucha based thing. So they did a full new name and a reposition and then a redesign, and that helped them accelerate. Same with RX Bar. They did a big redesign that launched them. And so I believe in this concept of a minimal viable brand. There's like MVP, which is like used a lot in the tech space. But I think that oftentimes entrepreneurs need to just get something out into market as efficiently as possible to gain real world learnings to then take to an agency or a small boutique group or something like that to work from. But when you're starting something with a completely clean slate, there are going to be so many miscalculations or false truths that you have in what you're building that you're going to redo a lot of it anyways. And that's not to say it's not worth the investment at the outset. It depends on the business and how familiar the product is. Like Liquid Death can do what it's done because it's water at the end of the day. They didn't have to spend any education on what's inside of it. It was all about the marketing around it. And the founder of Liquid Death, ex-creative agency guy, he knew what he wanted to build and he had the right vision, and that worked for that particular space and that problem.
No, yeah, Liquid Death is like my go-to example. I'd say like Last Crumb is another one, right? That's they partner with a truffle agency, right? So there's ownership there. So now you've got investment as a creative in this. So when you're launching, it's not like the MVP. It's full,
And with a product that costs $120 to receive in the mail, it better be well designed day one, or no one's 100%. Paying for that. So
you're not getting any good social. What do you think of? So what do you think of like some of these startups that offer? And I know you got a hard stop here. What do you think of some of these brands that offer stock in their company for a young designer, like at the beginning? I know I've received a ton, and then it's just turned to nothing. I've heard from a lot of designers that are like, yeah, I'm getting 10%. I'm like, yeah, but 10% of nothing is still nothing.
Yeah. Right. Well, as an agency, it was always tough to build a team with equity because it's not paying for anyone's salaries. 2, the success rate is extremely low. So you're talking about like, a unicorn in order for any of those things to mature. 3, the amount of time that equity takes to be realized as some sort of great investment and be capitalized on. into liquidity mode. It's probably 7 to 10 years from that time. And then I think ultimately, I heard something once that I really liked was, if a company is offering to give you equity, you probably don't want it. It's when you have to ask for it that you want it. And I've always found that to be interesting. But look, we all take bets. At the end of the day, I think the better thing to do is a blend of fees and equity rather than outright equity.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great advice. So just two quick things before we wrap up, man, if you've got the time.
I've got a little wiggle room.
All right, perfect. So you've given a ton of advice to young creatives that are starting out, but like, what's one thing that maybe you haven't said that you want to say that I think would be helpful to a young creative getting started in this industry?
Well, I think it's sometimes can be a tough industry to get to in general. Finding a job, getting the interview, landing it, all of that stuff. The people that do their homework, that go above and beyond, that are looking into who's leading the company, trying to find podcasts, listening to them, have they written any articles? That type of proactive behavior, I think, speaks leaps and bounds in the interview process. And as I said at the outset, we always hired for character, their attitude around work, communication skills, all of those things, more so than we did their technical skills. They're going to learn so many technical skills on the job. I don't care how creative you are. Even if you go and get an MBA at like the School of Visual Arts, there's just a lot that's going to happen in the trenches. But it's still, at the end of the day, a human-to-human business. Design is solving problems for other people. And so the better you are at working with others, the more likely you are to succeed in your career long-term.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. And then last thing here, man, if somebody wants to reach out to you and work with you, who's the right type of client to reach out to you, and where can they find you?
So you can find me at fredhart.com, HART, or on LinkedIn. I love working with businesses that have found product market fit, but have some sort of challenge to get to their next level. So, companies that are anywhere from 10 to 100 million in revenue that are looking to move out of natural and compete with more conventional brands, or are bringing on new innovation and have to organize their product portfolio and segmentation strategy, that have not leveraged the consumer insights into their brand to help make those things connect as best as possible. For me, I love solving business challenges through design. And so the more stable a business is, or the more that it's found a product market fit, the more I love to work with them to help accelerate that growth and ultimately create connection with consumers.
That's awesome, man. So definitely go hunt Fred down at fredhart.com. I see you did some stuff for Dr. Squatch.
Oh yeah. That was a super fun one. They weren't even in retail yet. We helped them move from the D2C space, which is so interesting because you kind of exist in your own bubble. And now they had to get on shelves and compete with other soap brands for the first time. And the thing that I love about packaging is it's the only form of competitive design, where even if you're an upstart, you still have to sit next to all the big guys, and the big guys have to sit next to all the disruptors. And that's where the psychology of design comes in. And so we helped really prepare them for the retail moment and then explosive growth after that.
Oh, that's crazy, man. That's awesome. Hey, thank you so much, man. Fred, I appreciate you being on here. I'm going to stop recording.
Cool. You're the best. Thanks, man.